In our meditation on the larger catechism, we are looking at questions numbers 123 and 124. They read as follows: which is the fifth commandment? The answer is that the fifth commandment is, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Question 124, who are meant by the father and mother in the fifth commandment? By father and mother in the fifth commandment are meant not only natural parents, but all superiors in age and gifts, and especially such as by God's ordinance are over us in place of authority, whether in family, church, or commonwealth. In this fifth commandment, we begin to consider our duties towards one another. We are reminded last week that in our responsibilities towards each other, we are to walk in love. And so these commandments are ways in which we express that love in meaningful ways. Here in this commandment, we are to consider our relationship to our parents, fathers and mothers, and how we are to honor them before the Lord. The Catechism wants to broaden our understanding of what it means to say that we are to honor our father and mother. What the Catechism has in mind here is showing us that the commandment has to do with all those authority relationships that we have in all of human life. Not merely within the home between parents and their children, which is the natural way in which we would look at this commandment, but it also embraces all other patterns of authority in human society. The patterns that exist in the state, the commonwealth, where governors, mayors, presidents, what have you, have authority over those underneath them. And similarly, we beneath them have a certain duty to them. And not only within the state or the commonwealth, but also within the church. God establishes a certain set of relationships between us, between those who are in authority and those who are not so at this time. So the Catechism begins to divide our authority relationships as between superiors and inferiors and those who are equal to each other. And we'll develop that as time goes on. But most particularly, the Catechism at this point directs our attention to the fact that in God's ordinance, or by His authority, He places some folks over us in the Lord, bearing certain levels of responsibility. And so they may be superiors in the family, parents and so forth. Obviously, we think of that relationship at the start. But you might not consider that within the family relationships, those within the household, slaves, servants, in other cultures and times, would have been within a family relationship and obligated to honor those who are in authority over them, honor the parent or the head of the house. We see that in the Old Testament, in the book of Kings, when one of the Syrian kings came to the prophet, I believe it was Elisha. Those are two close names. Elisha, who the Syrian came and wanted to be cleansed of his leprosy, and he was directed to go and wash in the Jordan River. Well, why go to that Jordan River? It's a dirty river. Why not go to any other river? Aren't there nice rivers back in Syria or what have you? And his servants appealed to him as their father. Father, if the prophet had asked you to do some great thing, wouldn't have you have done that? Then why not just do this? And so there was a feeling of affection between the slave within the Syrian's household and the master. A parent-child relationship, if you will. So there are those relationships within the family. And incidentally, the Catechism here nicely divides our human life in these three basic institutions: family, church, and state. These are three covenantal institutions in which we serve the Lord. And they are different spheres which have their own sets of authority. They interrelate to one another, And in some respects, this is where you see the distinction between church and state that's developed in the Reformation point of view. And so, we consider next to the church, we are to have a family relationship to one another. When you come into our church building, you'll see on our sign, at the very base of it, something that says, come join, not our church, but our family. We have a family relationship. Those who are over you in the Lord are fathers in the faith. We are children before the Lord Himself, and in fellowship with one another, we are equals to each other. The Apostle Paul spoke of his relationship to the Galatians in Galatians chapter 5, which we considered, or the end of chapter 4, when he said that he is still in the pains of labor that Christ be formed within his congregation. He was comparing himself to a mother, having a mother's relationship to a child. And so those who are within the church have this kind of relationship. In other places he speaks of Timothy as his son in the Lord. And of course we are all considered brothers in Christ, brothers and sisters in Christ. We are Christ's family in the church. And finally, in the commonwealth, the state, those who are over us in the Lord in our state are to be viewed with affection and love as those who have a paternal care for us. They are to watch over us and to provide and protect us as a father would his own family. And so those who enter into office to serve as congressmen, senators, judges, presidents, what have you, have an obligation to consider the people underneath them as children, as their children, as those for whom they are entrusted to care for them. Not just simply take advantage of them, plunder them through various schemes and so forth. They are to have the relationship of parents to their inferiors. One note that I missed here, you'll see that in the Catechism it says that it speaks of those who are superiors in age and gifts. So those who are older than us in the Lord should have a certain respect and be regarded as fathers. Paul tells Titus in Titus chapter 2, I believe, that he is to address those who are older than him as fathers, those who are younger than him as children. So there were these family relationships within the church based on age. And then further, gifts. There's a reference in Genesis chapter 4 where a couple of the sons of one of the wives of Lamech were responsible for culture, playing the flute and so forth. And Moses describes him as the father of all those who play the flute or musical instruments. And so within a certain culture, there is a father-son relationship. When you get into the various arts and sciences and various gifts that God has given to us, there are those who are to be esteemed as the fathers of a particular field of medicine, or father of a particular area, branch of science, or poetry, or what have you. These gifts are given to us, and we have a paternal relationship with them as well. Also, Genesis 4 speaks of another son who is the father of those who raise cattle and so forth. So agriculture became a field of specialty. So these gifts are given, and we have a paternal care for those underneath us, to care for us. So in our business, we have relationships underneath us, and we are to care for our employees as though they were our very children. Now we'll talk more about this in the weeks to come, but here we are reminded that we are to give honor to those who are our fathers and mothers.